Hi, everybody. I'm going to try and explain why I think young Earth creationists are like bent coppers. So imagine there's a crime in a big country house. A bag of rare, expensive diamonds are stolen from the family home. There, there are a team of police officers working on the case. And as they investigate further, it's becoming more and more evident that this was an inside job. And that as the evidence mounts, the father of the family, let's call him Derek, he looks more and more like he's responsible for the theft. The police discovered that the window that was smashed on entry was actually smashed from the inside. They discover small shards of glass, the same glass from the window in Derek's jumper and his shoes, say, and CCTV in the nearby village captures Derek handing over a small bag in exchange for a briefcase, say, and the police find the briefcase under the blanket in the boot of Derek's car. The briefcase contains thousands of pounds in used notes, and bank records reveal that Derek had been accumulating significant debt over the past year, say, due to a gambling problem. The further the police investigation goes, the more the evidence incriminates Derek. The police are ready to make an arrest, but suppose there was a lone police officer, let's call him Ken, who refused to believe the evidence implicating Derek, despite it being plentiful. At every juncture, Ken denounces the evidence gathered by the other officers. He does everything he can to take the attention off Derek. And furthermore, Ken is found to have been withholding vital information related to the investigation and deliberately attempting to mislead his colleagues on the evidence found. The other police officers in the station and the senior police officers in charge would be fairly justified at this stage in suspecting that something is unreliable and untrustworthy about Ken's conduct, and that he's beginning to look like, as I said at the start, a bent copper. Now, young Earth creationists, they are Christianity's equivalent of Ken, the bent copper. One of the most perturbing questions for me with the likes of Ken Ham, Grady McMurtry, Nathaniel Jeanson, con artists like that has been, do they really believe this anti-evolutionary nonsense? Or are they just deceptive con men, bent coppers in a, are they, the more exposure I have to them, the more they look like bent coppers to me, like rotten apples in Christianity's barrel. And to extend the crime scene analogy further, one of the most unfortunate things about these bent coppers is that it's as though a really compelling piece of new evidence is brought forward by an officer, evidence that implicates Derek once and for all. And these bent coppers do their best to tamper with it so that it no longer looks like evidence at all, or they hide it away at the bottom of an old filing cabinet in the police station and hope that their fellow officers will never notice it. Now, in case the analogy isn't fully clear, what I'm getting at is in denying things like the universe's real age of billions of years and positing the absurd notion of a universe that's only a few thousand years old, the young Earth creationists are, in fact, they're missing what is probably the strongest evidence of God's fingerprints on the physical substrate of the universe. And I don't just mean missing in the sense of overlooking. I mean that the genius of God has exhibited what I call the mathematical engine driving the universe's trajectory, in that it's perhaps the most tangible evidence of his creative hand in all of physics. So, as well as all the lies and distortions in believing in 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 being young Earth creationists, the opportunity costs are severe too, because to be a young Earth creationist, it disregards God's most tangible fingerprints at the scene of the crime, so to speak, at the scene of the investigation. Um, I've covered this in much finer detail in my book, The Genius of the Invisible God, but just to lay it out more succinctly here, um, it's to do with how the universe is set up after the Big Bang. So the universe's uh, cosmic trajectory since the Big Bang follows a biased random walk, because for a random walk to be biased, there must be conscious intentionality, and intentionality of this magnitude can only come from a highly sophisticated mind, given the mathematics. So, yet a universe that exhibits the kind of mathematical sophistication required to uh, choreograph a biased random walk, especially if you understand the magnitude of the combinatorial search space, it cannot even be considered without drawing on an equally sophisticated mental artifact. So, from the point of the Big Bang, as we know, the universe rapidly expanded, and in terms of what happens next, um, to the 10 to the what power of 80 particles, which is basically it's a one followed by 80 zeros. Um, the system underwent a process of what's called combinatorial explosion, which is basically an exponential increase in possibilities of configuration of particles as the number of variables increases. So clearly a universe with 10 to the 80 particles is it's going to have a number of configurational possibilities of unimaginable dimensions in an unconstrained system. You can expect randomness to be predominant in the story, and of course, as we know, it is. But amongst the randomness, the universe exhibits degrees of order that one would not be entitled to expect in such a short time frame, given the magnitude of scope of possibilities within this aforementioned combinatorial explosion. So, if the laws of physics are enabling a huge constraint on the possibilities, then the algorithms that program the constraint must be in the mathematics that governs the laws of physics, just like a a physical computer, where a computer program is a set of instructions um, in programming language for a computer to execute. Um, in the in the universe, from the combinatorial search space of every possible configuration of microstates, which is the system of particles I mentioned, we find that this search space is nigh on immeasurably large, huge. So the mathematical front loading, it acts like computer instructions that implement the constraint. And I know that's quite hard to picture. So I have a couple of analogies which I offered in the book. So um, one of which was of the Royal Albert Hall. So imagine that heat bursts into a large room like the Albert Hall, which I think most of us have probably been in the Albert Hall and seen what it's like. So heat keeps bursting in up to a point. Um, so while it would naturally diffuse throughout the room, and it would produce a higher average temperature overall. Suppose we find that the heat, in fact, we do find this in the mathematics, it doesn't diffuse evenly. In fact, a powerful force is pushing, or perhaps uh, in terms of physics, it's probably more accurately pulling the heat to concentrate in a particular um, part of the hall, say a channel into the Albert Hall. So you find that the most of the Albert Hall is a tiny bit warm, and the part where the concentration is very, very hot. Now, you're going to think something's very strange about that. That's not how heat should diffuse. And the other example I offered was a huge a barrel full of marbles of different colors. They were released down a big hill with a very uneven surface, making it nigh on impossible to predict where each one of those marbles will land. But thanks to some profound and clearly deliberate wind assistance, we observe actually that all of the red marbles, we observe them swirling around and rolling towards a place at the bottom of the hill where, let's say, they all roll on in a straight line, a perfectly straight line, while all the other colored marbles are bashing around randomly all over the place. You'd obviously know that something profound and intelligent was guiding the the red marbles in a profound way, especially if it only happened once, of course. I mean, if you did it a trillion times, that still wouldn't happen, I'm sure. But remember the universe, the Big Bang. We're talking about one explosion here. Now, because of the quantum world and the radical undermining of simple cause and effect in the quantum world, in the quantum universe, these analogies that I just mentioned, they're only offered to illustrate the level of. They're offered to explain the mathematical constraint. Of course, the quantum world is different from the Newtonian world. So the analogies are to explain the mathematics, not as an exact simulacrum of quantum states of the cosmos. But if we can return to the computer program illustration, the universe is behaving like a complex adaptive system with it's a search and select function that is programmed with a mathematical bias in the form of these, you might call them teleological search algorithms that skew the system towards high local order in an astonishingly rapid execution time, one that it utterly confounds the probabilities we'd expect in the combinatorial explosion after the Big Bang. And just as a reminder, when atheist physicists and cosmologists they say things like, but the universe, the size of ours and the age of ours, has a high probability of generating life without the need for God, on account that they say there are 200 billion stars in our galaxy and 2 trillion galaxies. But I cover this too in my book. It's the wrong way to think about it. Yes, 200 billion stars and 2 trillion galaxies. They're of course they're staggering numbers, and therefore surely once astronomically large numbers are plugged into the equation with such a huge search space of possibilities, they say we are bound to find life on at least some of the planets, and this one happens to be one of them where we live. Of course, it's a popular argument, but as I've said, it's dubious. What they don't understand is even in a universe of 200 billion stars in our galaxy and 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. The logarithmic consideration of those numbers puts them into a perspective which shows they are relatively small numbers, and and of themselves are highly likely to be insufficient, or very unlikely to be sufficient to ensure the creation of life by evolution. So, I mean, calculating logarithms, it's basically working out the exponent to which a base must be raised to arrive at a given number. So if the number is 100, it's 10 to the power of 2, 1,000, 10 to the power of 3, and a million is 10 to the power of 6, and so on. So with the combinatorial search space of every possible configuration of microstates that we mentioned, in the universe, we find the search space is nigh on immeasurably huge. So whatever the 10 to the power of n number digits is, it's going to be a number in length that's such a long digit string that it may not even be possible to count, even with the current computational resources. So saying, it's had 14 billion years is just not good enough. It goes without saying that the 10 to the power of n combinatorial search space is going to be immeasurably larger than our observable universe, even at its size and scale, just as the possible arrangements of playing cards in a deck is going to be astronomically larger than the number of playing cards in the box, of course. So relative to the size of the search space, the size and scope of the universe is minuscule in terms of scope for producing order from the results of a random set of computations. In other words, if we're asking the universe to produce the ordered complexity to provide the substrate on which biological evolution can run, we find that given the size of our universe, the number of opportunities for life to form by chance, it's way too meager, despite the impressive number of stars and galaxies in our universe. Or to put it another way, let's put it the other way around, say, a universe of our size and scope would not be able to produce the substrate on which that biological evolution can run without a huge and highly contingent combinatorial constraint imposed on it when the laws of physics were created, or when they were up and running after the Big Bang. It's a constraint that clearly shows it was created by an intelligent designer. So the upshot is the point of this. I mean, that's the best evidence for God in the physical universe you're going to get, Christianity aside and the incarnation aside. This is evidence from maths and physics. So it's the strongest you're going to find in the universe anywhere, as far as I can tell. But aside from all the distortions and embarrassments to the faith from the young Earth creationists, one of the saddest things about young Earth creationism for me, on a more personal level, is that they are robbing themselves and the people they influence of perhaps the greatest gift to us, aside from Christ, in terms of God exhibiting his creative genius in the universe for us all to decipher if we so wish. So, and given that the young Earth creationists, the thing they're most terrified of is the notion that the atheists keep putting forward of a universe that isn't designed, and an evolutionary story that gives God the elbow. It's doubly sad that actually the story of evolution is one of the parts of the cosmic story whereby, in the precursory mathematics and physics we have the best evidence in the world for God's creative genius. So it's sad that in adopting young Earth creationism, the young Earth creationists are denying themselves the the evidence on the table. Thank you for listening.